Hello, and welcome to my channel, Reading Little Blue Books, out loud. This right here is a little blue book. It happens to be Little Blue Book number 239, and it is titled 26 Men and a Girl. It's a strange title. And it's written by Maxim Gorky. G-O-R-K-Y, Gorky. And of course, there is no copyright date, but we're going to put it around early 1920s. Alrighty, there are 4 chapters to this book. First chapter is 26 Men and a Girl. Second chapter is On a Raft. Third chapter, Her Lover. And the final chapter, One Autumn Night. And take a drink of coffee, and we'll get this show started. All right. And here we go. 26 Men and a Girl. There were 26 of us, 26 living machines in a damp underground cellar, where from morning till night we kneaded dough and rolled it into kringles. Opposite the underground window of our cellar was a bricked area, green and moldy with moisture. The window was protected from outside with a close iron grating, and the light of the sun could not pierce through the window panes, covered as they were with flour dust. Our employer had bars placed in front of the windows, so that we should not be able to give a bit of his bread to passing beggars, or to any of our fellows who were out of work and hungry. Our employer called us rogues, and gave us half-rotten tripe to eat for our midday meal, instead of meat. It was swelteringly close for us cooped up in that stone underground chamber, under the low, heavy, soot-blackened, cobwebby ceiling, dreary and sickening with our life between its thick, dirty, moldy walls. Unrefreshed and with a feeling of not having had our sleep out, we used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and before 6 we were already seated, worn out and apathetic, at the table, rolling out the dough which our mates had already prepared while we slept, the whole day, from 10 in the early morning until 10 at night. Some of us sat round that table, working up in our hands the yielding paste, rolling it to and fro so that it should not get stiff, while the others kneaded the swelling mass of dough. And the whole day the simmering water in the kettle, where the kringles were being cooked, sang low and sadly, and the baker's shovel scraped harshly over the oven floor as he threw the slippery bits of dough out of the kettle on the heated bricks. From morning till evening wood was burning in the oven, and the red glow of the fire gleamed and flickered over the walls of the bake-shop, as if silently mocking us. The giant oven was like the misshapen head of a monster in a fairy tale. It thrust itself out of the floor, opening wide jaws full of glowing fire, and blew hot breath upon us. It seemed to be ever watching out of its black air holes, out of its black holes our interminable work. Those 2 deep holes were like eyes, the cold, pitiless eyes of a monster. They watched us always with the same darkened glance, as if they were weary of seeing before them such eternal slaves, from whom they could expect nothing human, and therefore scorned them with the cold scorn of wisdom. In meal dust, in the mud which we brought in from the yard, on our boots, in the hot sticky atmosphere, day in, day out, we rolled the dough into kringles, which we moistened with our own sweat, and we hated our work with a glowing hatred. We never ate what had passed through our hands, and preferred black bread to kringles. Sitting opposite each other at a long table, 9 facing 9, we moved our heads and fingers mechanically during endlessly long hours, till we were so accustomed to our monotonous work that we ceased to pay any attention to it. We had all studied each other so constantly that each of us knew every wrinkle of his mate's face. It was not long also before we had exhausted almost every topic of conversation. That is why we were most of the time silent, unless we were chaffing each other. But one cannot always find something about which to chaff another man, especially when that man is one's mate. Neither were we much given to finding fault with one another. How indeed could one of us poor devils be in any position to find fault with another, when we were all of us half dead and, if it were, turned to stone? For the heavy drudgery seemed to crush all feeling out of us. But silence is only terrible and fearful for those who have said everything and have nothing more to say to each other. For men, on the contrary, who have never begun to communicate with one another, it is easy and simple. Sometimes, too, we sang, and this is how it happened. That we began to sing, one of us would sigh deeply in the midst of our toil, like an overdriven horse, and then we would begin one of those songs whose gentle swaying melody seems always to ease the burden on the singer's heart. At first one sang by himself, and we others sat in silence listening to his solitary song, which, under the heavy vaulted roof of the ceiling, died gradually away, and became extinguished, like a little fire in the steeps, on a wet autumn night, when the gray heaven hangs like a heavy mass over the earth. Then another would join in with the singer, and now two soft, sad voices would break into song in our narrow, dull hole of a cellar. Suddenly others would join in, and the song would roll forward like a wave, would grow louder and swell upward, till it would seem as if the damp, foul walls of our stone prison were widening out and opening. Then all 26 of us would be singing. Our loud, harmonious song would fill the air, would fill the whole cellar. Our voices would travel outside and beyond, striking as it were against the walls in moaning sobs and sighs, moving our hearts with soft, tantalizing ache, tearing upon old wounds and awakening longings. The singers would sigh deeply and heavily. Suddenly one would become silent and listen to the other singing, then let his voice flow once more in the common tide. Another would exclaim in a stifled voice, "Ah!" and would shut his eyes, while the deep, full sound waves would show him, as it were, a road in front of him, a sunlit, broad road in the distance, which he himself, in thought, wandered along. But the flame flickers once more in the huge oven, the baker scrapes incessantly with his shovel, the water simmers in the kettle, and the flicker of the fire on the wall dances as before in silent mockery, while in other men's words we sing out our dumb grief and weary burden of live men robbed of the sunlight, the burden of slaves. So we lived with 26 in the vault-like cellar of a great stone house, and we suffered each one of us as if we had to bear on our shoulders the whole 3 stories of that house. But we had something else good, besides the singing, something we loved, that perhaps took the place of the sunshine. In the 2nd story of our house there was established a gold embroiderer's shop, and there, living among the other embroidery girls, was Tanya, a little maid servant of 16. Every morning there peeped in through the glass door a rosy little face, with merry blue eyes, with a ringing, tender voice called out to us, "Little prisoners, have you any kringles, please, for me?" And that clear sound we knew so well, we all used to turn round, gazing with simple-hearted joy at the pure girlish face which smiled at us so sweetly. The sight of the small nose pressed against the window-pane, and of the white teeth gleaming between the half-open lips, had become for us a daily pleasure. Tumbling over each other, we used to jump up to open the door, and she would step in, bright and cheerful, holding out her apron with her head thrown to one side and a smile on her lips. Her thick, long chestnut hair fell over her shoulder and across her breast. But we, ugly, dirty, and misshapen as we were, looked up at her. The threshold door was 4 steps above the floor. Looked up at her with heads thrown back, wishing her good morning and speaking strange, unaccustomed words which we kept for her only. Our voices became softer when we spoke to her. Our jests were lighter. For her, everything was different with us. The baker took from his oven a shovel of the best and brownest Kringles and threw them deftly into Tanya's apron. "Be off with you now, or the boss will catch you," he warned her each time. She laughed roguishly, called out cheerfully, "Goodbye, poor prisoners," and slipped away as quick as a mouse. That was all. But long after she had gone, we talked about her to one another with pleasure. It was always the same thing as we had said yesterday and the day before, because everything about us, including ourselves and her, remained the same as yesterday and as always. Pardon me. Painful and terrible it is when the man goes on living, while nothing changes around him. And when such an existence does not finally kill his soul, then the monetary becomes, with time, even more and more painful. Generally, we spoke about women in such a way that sometimes it was loathsome to us ourselves and Let me reread that. Generally, we spoke about women in such a way that sometimes it was loathsome to us ourselves to bear our rude, shameless talk. The women whom we knew deserved perhaps nothing better, but about Tanya we never let fall an evil word. None of us ever ventured so much as to lay a hand on her, even to free a jest she never heard from us. Maybe this was so because she never remained for long with us. She flashed in our eyes like a star falling from the sky and vanished. And maybe because she was little and very beautiful, and everything beautiful calls forth respect, even in coarse people. And besides, though our life of penal labor had made us dull beasts, oxen, we were still men, and like all men, could not live without worshipping something or other. Better than her we had none, and none but her took any notice of us, living in the cellar. No one, though there were dozens of people in the house. And then, too, most likely, this was the chief thing, we all regarded her as something of our own, something existing as it were only by virtue of our Kringles. We took on ourselves in turn the duty of providing with her hot Kringles, and this became for us like a daily sacrifice to our idol. It became almost a sacred rite, and every day it bound us more closely to her. Besides Kringles, we gave Tanya a great deal of advice. To wear warmer clothes, not to run upstairs too quickly, not to carry heavy bundles of wood. She listened to all our counsels with a smile, answered them by a laugh, and never took our advice. But we were not offended at that. All we wanted was to show how much care we bestowed upon her. Often she would apply to us with different requests. She asked us, for instance, to open the heavy door into the store cellar, and to chop wood. With delight and a sort of pride we did this for her, and everything else she wanted. But when one of us asked her to mend his solitary shirt for him, she said, with a laugh of contempt, "What next? A likely idea." We made great fun of the queer fellow who could entertain such an idea, and never asked her to do anything else. We loved her. All is said in that. Man always wants to lay his love on someone, though sometimes he crushes, sometimes he sullies with it. He may poison another life because he loves without respecting the beloved. We were bound to love Tanya, for we had no one else to love. At times one of us would suddenly begin to reason like this. And why do we make so much of the wench? What is there in her, eh? What did you do we make about her? The man who dared to utter such words we promptly and coarsely cut short. We wanted something to love. We had found it and loved it. And what we 26 loved must be for each of us unalterable, as a holy thing, and anyone who acted against us in this was our enemy. We loved, maybe not what was really good, but you see, there were 26 of us, and so we always wanted to see what was precious to us held sacred by the rest. Our love is not less burdensome than hate, and maybe that is just why some proud souls maintain that our hate is more flattering than our love. But why do they not run away from us, if it is so? Besides our department, our employer had also a bread bakery. It was in the same house, separated from our hole only by a wall. But the bakers, there were 4 of them, held aloof from us, considering their work superior to ours, and therefore themselves better than us. They never used to come into our workroom, and laughed contemptuously at us when they met us in the yard. We, too, did not go to see them. This was forbidden by our employer, from fear that we should steal the fancy bread. We did not like the bakers, because we envied them. Their work was lighter than ours, they were paid more, and were better fed. They had a light, spacious workroom, and they were all so clean and healthy, and that made them hateful to us. We all looked gray and yellow. 3 of us had syphilis. Several suffered from skin diseases. 1 was completely crippled by rheumatism. On holidays and in their leisure time, the bakers wore pea jackets and creaking boots. 2 of them had accordions, and they all used to go for strolls in the town gardens. We wore filthy rags and leather clogs or plaited shoes on our feet. The police would not let us into the town gardens. Could we possibly like the bakers? And one day we learned that their chief baker had been drunk. The master had him sacked, and had already taken on another. And this other was a soldier, wore a satin waistcoat, and a watch, and a gold chain. We were inquisitive to get a sight of such a dandy, and in the hope of catching a glimpse of him, we kept running one after another out into the yard. But he came of his own accord into our room. Kicking at the door, he pushed it open, and having it ajar, stood in the doorway smiling, and said to us, "God help the work! Good morning, mates." The ice-cold air, which steamed in through the open door, curled in streaks of vapor round his feet. He stood on the threshold, looked us up and down, and under his fair, twisted mustache gleamed big yellow teeth. His waistcoat was really something, quite out of the common, blue-flowered, brilliant, with shining little buttons of red stones. He also wore a watch chain. He was a fine fellow, this soldier, tall, healthy, rosy-cheeked, and his big, clear eyes had a friendly, cheerful glance. He wore on his head, a white, scratched cap, and from under his spotlessly clean apron peeped and pointed toes of fashionable, well-blacked boots. Our baker asked him politely to shut the door. The soldier did so without hurrying himself, and began to question us about the master. We explained to him, all speaking together, that our employer was a thorough-going brute, a rogue, a knave, and a slave driver. In a word, we repeated to him all that can and must be said about an employer, but cannot be repeated here. The soldier listened to us, twisted his mustache, and watched us with a friendly, open-hearted look. "But haven't you got a lot of girls here?" he asked suddenly. Some of us began to laugh differentially. Others put on a meaning expression, and one of us explained to the soldier that there were 9 girls here. "You make the most of them?" asked the soldier, with a wink. We laughed, but not so loudly, and with some embarrassment. Many of us would have liked to have shown the soldier that we also were tremendous fellows with the girls, but not one of us could do so. And one of our number confessed as much, when he said in a low voice, "That sort of thing is not in our line." "Well, no, it wouldn't quite do for you," said the soldier with conviction, after having looked us over. "There is something wanting about you all. You don't look the right sort. You've no sort of appearance, and the women, you see, they like a bold appearance. They will have a well set-up body. Everything has to be tip-top for them. That's why they respect strength. They want an arm like that." The soldier drew his right hand, with his turned-up shirt sleeve, out of his pocket and showed us his bare arm. It was white and strong and covered with shining yellow hairs. "Leg and chest all must be strong, and then a man must be dressed in the latest fashions, so as to show off his looks to advantage. Yes, all the women take to me, whether I call to them or whether I beckon them. They, with one accord, 5 at a time, throw themselves at my head." He sat down on a flour sack and told at length all about the way women loved him, and how bold he was with them. Then he left, and after the door had creaked to behind him, we sat for a long time silent and thought about him and his talk. Then we all suddenly broke silence together, and it became apparent that we were all equally pleased with him. He was such a nice, open-hearted fellow, who came to see us without any standoffishness, sat down and chatted. No one else came to us like that, and no one else talked to us in that friendly sort of way, and we continued to talk of him and his coming triumph among the embroidery girls, who passed us by with contemptuous sniffs when they saw us in the yard, or who looked straight through us as if we had been air. But we admired them always when we met them outside, or when they walked past our windows in winter, in fur jackets and toques to match, in summer in hats trimmed with flowers, and with colored parasols in their hands. We talked, however, about these girls in a way that would have made them mad with shame and rage if they could have heard us. "If only he does not get hold of little Tanya," said the baker, suddenly, in an anxious tone of voice. We were silent, for these words troubled us. Tanya had quite gone out of our minds, supplanted, put on one side by the strong, fine figure of the soldier. Then began a lively discussion. Some of us maintained that Tanya would never lower herself so. Others thought she would not be able to give him a thrashing. Others thought she would not be able to resist him, and a third group proposed to give him a thrashing if he should try to annoy Tanya. And finally, we all decided to watch the soldier and Tanya, and to warn the girl against him. This brought the discussion to an end. 4 weeks had passed by since then. During this time the soldier baked white bread, walked about with the gold embroidery girls, visited us often, did not talk any more about his conquests, only twisted his mustache and licked his lips lasciviously. Tanya called in as usual every morning for little kringles, and was as gay and as nice and friendly with us as ever. We certainly tried once or twice to talk to her about the soldier, but she called him a goggle-eyed calf, and made fun of him all round, and that set our minds at rest. We saw how the gold embroidery girls carried on with the soldier, and we were proud of our girl. Tanya's behavior reflected honor on us all. We imitated her, and began in our talks to treat the soldier with small consideration. She became dearer to us, and we greeted her with more friendliness and kindness every morning. One day the soldier came to see us, a bit drunk, and sat down and began to laugh. When we asked him what he was laughing about, he explained to us. "Why, two of them, that Lydka girl and Grushka, have been clawing each other on my account. You should have seen the way they went for each other. Ha ha! One got hold of the other one by the hair, threw her down on the floor of the passage, and sat on her. Ha ha! They scratched and tore each other's faces. It was enough to make one die with laughter. Why is it women can't fight fair? Why do they always scratch one another, huh?" He sat on the bench, healthy, fresh, and jolly. He sat there and went on laughing. We were silent. This time he made an unpleasant impression on us. "Well, it's a funny thing what luck I have with the women folk, huh? I've laughed till I'm fill. One wink, and it's all over with them. It's the devil." He raised his white hairy hands and slapped them down on his knees, and his eyes seemed to reflect such frank astonishment as if he were himself quite surprised at his good luck with women. His fat red face glistened with delight and self-satisfaction, and he licked his lips more than ever. Our baker scraped the shovel violently and angrily along the oven floor, and all at once he said sarcastically, "There's no great strength. Need to pull up first saplings. But try a real pine tree." "Why, what do you mean by saying that to me?" asked the soldier. "Oh, well, what is it?" "Nothing. It slipped out." "No, wait a minute. What's the point? What pine tree?" Our baker did not answer, working rapidly away with a shovel at the oven, flinging into it the half-cooked kringles, taking out those that were done, and noisily throwing them on the floor to the boys, who were stringing them on a boust. He seemed to have forgotten the soldier in his conversation with him, but the soldier had all at once dropped into a sort of uneasiness. He got up to his feet and went over to the oven, at the risk of knocking against the handle of the shovel, which was waving spasmodically in the air. "No, tell me, do. What is it? You've insulted me. There's not one could withstand me. No. And you say such insulting things to me." He really seemed genuinely hurt. He must have had nothing else to pride himself on except his gift for seducing women. Maybe except for that, there was nothing living in him, and it was only that by which he could feel himself a living man. There are men to whom the most precious and best thing in their lives appears to be some disease of their soul or body. They spend their whole life in relation to it, only living by it, suffering from it. They sustain themselves on it. They complain of it to others, and so draw the attention of their fellows to themselves. For that they extract sympathy from people, and apart from it they have nothing at all. Take from them that disease, cure them, and they will be miserable, because they have lost their one resource in life. They are left empty then. Sometimes a man's life is so poor that he is driven instinctively to prize his vice and to live by it. One may say for a fact that often men are vicious from boredom. The soldier was offended, and he went up to our baker and roared, "No! Tell me who!" "Tell you," said the baker, turning suddenly on him. "Well, you know Tanya?" "Well, there then. Only try." Her? Why, that's nothing to me." "Pooh! We shall see." "You will see. Give me a month." "What a braggart you are, soldier." "A fortnight. I'll prove it." "Who is it? Tanya?" "Pooh!" Well, get out. You're in my way. A fortnight and it's done. You get out, I say. Our baker all at once flew into a rage and brandished his shovel. The soldier staggered away from him in amazement, looked at us, paused, and softly, malignantly said, "Oh, all right then," and went away. During the dispute, we had all sat silent, absorbed in it, but when the soldier had gone, eager, loud talk and noise arose among us. Someone shouted to the baker, "It's a bad job that you've started, Pavel." "Do your work," answered the baker savagely. We felt that the soldier had been deeply aggrieved, and that danger threatened Tanya. We felt this, and at the same time we were all possessed by a burning curiosity, most agreeable to us. What would happen? Would Tanya hold out against the soldier? And almost all cried confidently, "Tanya! She'll hold out. You won't catch her with your bare arms." We longed terribly to test the strength of our idol. And I think I'll stop there for the first part of 26 Men and a Girl. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in part 2.